Good morning, St. Luther. It is indeed another blessing that God has allowed us once again to rise to see a brand new day. And we find ourselves here again as we have been these past couple of weeks speaking about the justice that the Lord requires and the problems that come about when instead injustice is what is found. And so today, here again, the prophet Jeremiah is speaking. And it's no coincidence that once again, as it was on our previous lesson, that he starts out addressing the kings, or he starts out addressing the leadership. And so I'm suggesting to you that this is no coincidence that this is where he begins. And you know, there's a popular saying that to whom much is given, much is required. And so this is the case, and this is why the Lord has the prophet addressing the kings, because they are in a position of power, they're in a position of authority, and in fact, they should be setting the example for what God requires of his people. So we pick up here with no shortage in his request to the leadership. And our lesson today is coming from Jeremiah, the 22nd chapter, the 1st to the 10th verse. Our background can be found by reading the 22nd chapter of Jeremiah. And our adult topic for today is do the right thing. Our children topic is changing our ways. And so as we've been talking about justice, we've mentioned over and over again that justice is not something necessarily that you only receive, but the command from God is that you perform justice, or that you do justice, and thus it's such an appropriate topic that we do the right thing. And I once asked a question, that is, when is the right time to do the right thing? You know, I've heard some folks say that, well, now is not the right time. It just don't seem to be appropriate right now. But I believe our God says that the right time to do the right thing is right now. And so here, the word of the Lord, he speaks with the 22nd chapter, and we're going to start here looking at the 1st to the 3rd verse. And he says, and I ask you, what does the Lord require of his leaders and his followers? And this is what he said, starting with the 1st verse. Thus saith the Lord, go down to the house of the king of Judah and speak there this word, and say, hear the word of the Lord, O king of Judah, that sittest upon the throne of David, thou and thy servants, and thy people that enter in by these gates. Thus saith the Lord, execute ye judgment and righteousness, and deliver the spoiled out of the hand of the oppressor, and do no wrong. Do no violence to the stranger, the fatherless, nor the widow, neither shed innocent blood in this place. This was the command that God gave to the leadership. He gave it specifically to them in this instance because of the very position that they held. They held a position of authority. They held a position where they could exact change among the poor and the needy, those that required it, those that needed it, those who were oppressed and needed to be free. For many are in a position where they can't exact change. Many are in a position where they feel bound and they can't do anything about that situation. But God has placed many in a position to do just that, to exact change, to make a difference, to help those who are in need. And what he found in many instances is that in this position of power where much has been given, actually nothing was done to help. And in fact, in many cases, Not only did they not help, but they chose to abuse. They chose to take advantage of. And so he's pressing upon them, particularly to the leadership, that you better hear the word of the Lord. He didn't say, go down there and tell them this, Jeremiah. He said, go and say, thus saith the Lord, because it is his command. It is his requirement that we heed. And so, assuming that we do not do what the Lord requires, it begs the question, what does the Lord promise? And so we move on to the 4th and the 5th verse, and he says, for if ye do this thing indeed, then shall there enter in by the gates of this house kings sitting upon the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, he and his servants and his people. But now he says, but if ye will not hear these words, I swear by myself, saith the Lord, that this house shall become a desolation. And this is one of those things I found very compelling. It reminds me of my youth, that when I was growing up, you would hear people say, although I believe they didn't know what they were saying, I swear to God. Meaning, take me seriously right now. Some would even say, I swear by my mother. This is no joke. This is for real. And it reminded me of this when I read this, and God says, I swear by myself, meaning there is no greater authority that I swear by. There is no greater name that I swear by, that you better hear what I'm saying. I swear by my own name, the name that is greater than any other name. And he says that this house shall become a desolation. And if you don't know what that means destruction. That means that this will become a wasteland. That means that this will become a place where no one can inhabit it. I will destroy everything. And this is not a threat, because we know God don't make threats. God makes promises. And so this is so that you better heed what I'm saying. Prophet after prophet has come before you. Many have come proclaiming what I have required of you. But this time he says, I swear by myself. And if you don't think that the Lord is serious, try him. I wouldn't, for I believe that his word is true. And if he makes a promise, God will keep it. And so we find that oftentimes that people in position of prestige and power and leadership, they begin to feel entitled. They begin to feel untouchable. They begin to feel like they are wrapped in a bubble, as though nothing can harm them, that they've reached a certain a level of protection and safety. But I would not take the grace and the mercy of God for weakness, because he lets them know, I think very highly of you. But if we were to rephrase this in some of the popular lingo of today, he would say, but don't get it twisted. For whom the Lord loveth, he chastises. And so he lets them know. In the 6th verse, he says, for thus saith the Lord unto the king's house of Judah, thou art Gilead unto me, and the head of Lebanon. Yet surely I will make thee a wilderness, and cities which are not inhabited. And I will prepare destroyers against thee, everyone with his weapons, and they shall cut down thy choice cedars, and cast them into the fire. Gilead and Lebanon were beautiful places. They were mountainous places with high region and filled with plenty of forestry and trees of cedar. But God let them know that even though you're in a high place, even though you're in a position of prestige and honor and authority and power, I think highly of you. But make no mistake, if you do not heed my words and execute the judgment that I have required of you, I will destroy everything. And you know, when the Lord destroys something, he destroys it. He doesn't play around with it. You know, when the Lord destroys something, it's not livable. It won't be inhabited. There'll be nothing left. And so we can't make the mistake of feeling that I'm God's chosen. I have confessed him as Lord, and I'm a member of this church, and I'm a part of the body, and because of that, I've attained a certain level of protection, even when I don't heed his very word that he has given me. And so the Lord is instructing us once again that, you know, my word is true. It is the most important thing to me that I honor my word, I honor who I am. And even though I love you, make no mistake, if you do not heed my word and execute justice, for this is the very principal thing, for that is what God does. He does what is right. And as we have entered into a covenant relationship with him, the very principles of that covenant are that we, as well as his followers, do the right thing. And so we speak now about his punishment if we do not heed him. And you know, the punishment of God is unmistakable. Sometimes we attribute the destruction and the things that we go to other sources, but when it's from God, it's unmistakable. And so as we read the 8th and the 9th verse, listen to it. And he says, and many nations shall pass by this city, and they shall say, every man to his neighbor, wherefore hath the Lord done thus unto this great city? Then they shall answer, because they have forsaken the covenant of the Lord their God, and worshipped other gods, and served them. They didn't attribute this destruction to anyone else but the Lord. They asked the question, why has the Lord done thus? You know, even those that have not claimed him can realize when God is behind something, when God has his hand in something. And so they asked that question. And he said, because they have forsaken him. Now, one might say, hey, wait a minute. You know, I thought this was all about the kings and the fact that they didn't execute justice, you know, how they didn't move on the part of the poor and the oppressed, you know. So what is this about serving other gods? And what we have to understand is that, you see, the worship of God cannot be separated from the concern for the poor and the needy. You know, oftentimes we get it all mixed up when we speak of our worship. You know, for many see that the worship is about singing. The worship is about praying. The worship is about the paying of our tithes. But when it comes to justice, when it comes to the less fortunate, when it comes to the needy, the fatherless, the widows, the children, when it comes to those who aren't in a position to truly help themselves, this seems to go unnoticed. This seems to go ignored, because we've found ourselves all wrapped up in the worship service, and we don't understand that to worship God is to execute justice. To worship God is to serve his people. And for further illustration, I would like to ask, there are many who feel like I have a great relationship with God. Mistakenly, of course. And so I ask this question, for those who have children, I would like to ask, if your child was in need, if your child was suffering, if your child was in trouble, if your child was hurt, and your friend came along and was in a position to help them, but did not. Not only did they not help, they actually took advantage of the situation. I believe that there would now be a problem with that relationship. For some would say, what you do to my child, you do to me. It's a little hard to separate that. You mean to tell me that I can hate your child, but love you? There are many who say, I love the Lord, but I hate Sister Smith to my heart. They don't understand that the two are tied together. And so we must understand that true worship of God cannot be separated from the execution and performance of justice to the very ones that he has required us to help. Why is it that you've been blessed? Why is it that you have been given so much? Is it because of your pearly white record? Is it because you haven't sinned and fallen short of the glory of God? Why is it that you've been blessed so? I wonder if we would ask ourselves, maybe it is because what God has blessed me with, what he has given me, he expects for me to use for the glorification and upliftment of his kingdom. For when I was clothless, you gave me clothes. When I was hungry, you gave me food. And because I execute justice, because I do that which is right, God gets the glory. The fact that I execute justice, that is my worship. That is my glorification of God. And so many of us sometimes seem to forget that it's not just enough to praise him on Sunday. It's not just enough to sing his praises. But as our subject says, do the right thing. We must begin to be doers of his word and not hearers only. And so as we summarize this up, as the Lord himself has spoken it, you are to execute judgment. And to the congregation, neither should we think that this is the responsibility of the pastor and the pastor alone. Neither it is the responsibility of the deacons, mothers, or ushers. Some feel like that's the officer's job. I'm reminding you that when we stand before God, he's not going to call St. Luther up. He's going to call you by your name and ask what you have done and bring out your record, everything that has been recorded. And so we must look at ourselves in the mirror. We must ask ourselves the question, am I doing the right thing? And only God knows. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't have oversights. There are no loopholes. You see, for in the justice system that we experience in our world today, there are often times where the innocent go to jail. There are times when the guilty go free. There are some times when justice can be purchased and bought and bribed. But God says in his word, he says, I swear by myself, that if you don't heed my commands, that there is nothing coming but destruction. And we've often referred to him as a promise keeper, and he does keep his promises. So let us remember today as we reflect and examine ourselves in our own lives. Am I executing judgment? Am I looking out for the oppressed and the less fortunate? For this is what the Lord requires. This is what he is pressing upon us to do today. And if we do it, He promised the dynasties of these kings that they would continue and flourish. And thus that is his promise for us. We will flourish. We will prosper. We will reap the rewards. For we have often said that God is a promise keeper. He doesn't break his promises. And as he swears by his own name, the name that is above and greater than any other name, that as children of God, as followers of his, those that have entered into this covenant relationship with him, we must also do the right thing. And the right time to do the right thing is right now. And so if I were you, let us heed the word of the Lord. And let the church say, amen.